I've been keeping Corys for over a year now. I made this video to share what I've learned and how it compares to the common advice found online. Hi there, it's Connor. Corydoras were always one of my favorite fish as a kid growing up. I loved how cute and active they were and that they could go in most tanks, didn't take up too much space, and were great for community aquariums. Now, when I got back into the hobby as an adult, they're one of the fish I knew I had to get just because they went with a lot of other fish that I wanted to keep, and they were just fun little active guys. I wanted to go through a species profile and my experience keeping them after having them for over a year now. So first, I want to talk about tank size and setup. Now, for most Corys, the minimum recommended will be 20 gallons. There's a few smaller ones, pygmy Corys and such, where you can do 10 gallon, but as adults, generally 20 gallon is accepted as the minimum. You can probably get away with 15 and some species would be 10, but generally 20 was going to be most ideal. And the main reason for this is they don't get too big, but you do want to keep at least 4 Corys. Ideally, a group of 6 is best, but a group of 4 at the minimum, and that's of a single species type, is pretty much required. They're very social fish, and that'll make them be the most happy and thrive the best. So due to needing to have that many, and them also being very active, a 20 gallon really is the minimum that you want to have for them. Now for actual tank setup, this is pretty open-ended. The only requirement really is that for the bottom, sand is definitely recommended. You basically just don't want any gravel where it has sharp edges because they can injure their barbels on their face. But besides that, sand or smooth gravel work fine. I think they really like sand, really like dig through it, so I definitely recommend sand if you can do that. Otherwise, they're really not picky. They're not going to harm plants at all, so they're absolutely great for aquascapes or planted tanks. They will appreciate some hiding spaces, but if not, as long as you have sand, even an open tank will be fine. So really kind of whatever works, whatever works for you, they're not going to be picky as long as you don't have any substrate with sharp edges in it. Next, I want to talk about water conditions and parameters. Now, this will vary between Corydoras species, but in general, most of them do have very similar parameters. So I'm going to talk about that. But if you are thinking about getting a certain one, or if you picked up a certain species, definitely do further research just to make sure you have the right parameters. I do have a website made where I do have about 20 different varieties of Corydoras and their specific stats for them. So I'll link to that below, and you can search for your species to see if there's stats on there for the specific parameters. Overall, though, Corydoras tend to be on the cooler side of freshwater fish. Now, the typical community tank of like 78 degrees Fahrenheit, that will be perfect for most Corydoras. But above that, once you get into the 80s, most cannot handle that, and it's not ideal for them. The only exception is Sturbia Corys. They're great and actually really like 82 degrees or more. So if you have like a discus tank or something, that's the type you want in there. But besides that, the temperature tends to be between 72 and 79 degrees Fahrenheit. So your average community tank at about 78 will be fine with them. Now pH is between 6.0 and 7.5, and hardness between 1 to 15 degrees. Now the conditions I've kept my false Juliet Corys at is a temperature right between 76 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. It was mostly at 78 degrees Fahrenheit, but recently having the mollies, I've kept it a little cooler to hopefully prevent the mollies from breeding. pH has always been right around 7.4, so it is on the upper range, but it's always been stable, and they've always done great in that. And hardness is also more of the upper range. It's been right around 12 degrees, but they've done well as well. So as long as you keep everything stable and in those parameters, I don't see any problems. I think they're a very easy fish to keep, and a lot of others will say that. Basically, as long as you keep them in a group and you have stable parameters fitting in what they accept and a large enough tank, they'll do great. Related to parameters is maintenance. Now, they are a smaller fish and they also do help clean up. So water changes are still very important. As with any fish, but you're not really going to have to do anything special for them. Doing a standard maintenance schedule of 10 to 20% per week, or even 20% every 2 weeks, I think will be more than great. Obviously, it depends on the rest of your stock, but if you have a low to moderately stocked tank that's large enough, you're not going to need to do any special maintenance. I think 20% every 2 weeks will be fine, or 10 to 20 every week will be fine as well. And then based on your load, you can adjust that as needed. To talk about food real quick, they're not very picky. Pretty much going to the pet store and getting any bottom feeder pellets, especially shrimp pellets, you usually see a Corydoras picture on them. Any of those will be great. One thing that maybe it's kind of like some people think this is they first get into the hobby is, they're just going to feed on bottom scraps and they can survive on that. That's not true. You do want to make sure you're giving them specific food as well. Although they will help clean up and will eat scraps from other fish, so that's a benefit that they have. But you do want to make sure they're fed as well. And now the foods that I've had the most success with are just simply shrimp pellets and shrimp wafers. The one by APA, just bottom feeder pellets. The shrimp pellets, they absolutely love these, and these are great. And then also shrimp wafers by Tetra. These have also done great, and they go right for these. And then if you have other fish in the tank, just having like flakes and bloodworms and stuff, and having other variety that you're feeding them so they can get the scraps of them will help also give them some variety as well. For growth and size, they are one of the slowest growing fish I've ever had. Now, I got my false Julii pretty small. They were less than an inch, I'd say, maybe 3/4 of an inch. But right now they are, and this is a year and a half, almost 2 years later, they're not even 2 inches. They're maybe 1.5 inches, probably closer to the 1 inch side. So their growth has been very, very small, or very, very slow. And from my research online, this has also been true for almost all species. At pet stores, I have seen some of the, larger cories that are 2, maybe going on 3 inches, and it's very cool to see them. But, it says the false Julii is supposed to get to about 2 inches, so I think they do have some room to grow, but grow very slow from my experience. For most species, you can expect them to get between 2 to 3 inches, some a little smaller, and there are a few that can get a bit larger, but that's kind of what you want to expect, between 2 to 3 inches. And I would expect, depending on the size you get them, they're just going to slowly keep growing over their lifetime, but don't expect them to get to that size right away. If you do want some of the larger ones, you'll see some of them at local fish stores every once in a while. At box stores, you really will only see small ones from my experience, but just shop around at local fish stores, and eventually you'll find some that are a little bit bigger, and that'll be better if you just want them to be that size, or keeping them with maybe slightly larger fish that you're worried about the small ones getting eaten. Now, next, for tank mates and their aggression, well, they aren't aggressive at all. They're completely peaceful. Some of the most peaceful fish you can keep. They can go with almost any other fish, basically any other fish that's not going to be too aggressive towards them, or because they're so small, or try to eat them. They'll be great with. They're great, absolutely great for the community tank. And for any planted tank too, they won't bother plants, but they'll get along with pretty much anybody. You can mix Corydoras species, but I'd still say you want at least 4 of an individual species. Although, let's say you have a group, and eventually if you die off, you only have 1 or 2 of that species, and you can't find that specific species again. It will be more beneficial than to just keep those 1 or 2 to get 4 or 5 of another type of species. I think they'll definitely be more happier altogether, but you still want to aim for 4+ of each individual species for them to thrive the best. And now I've kept them with a fair number of different species, and I've never had any problems. I've never seen any fish be too aggressive towards them, and they're absolutely peaceful towards everyone else. And now the fish I've kept them with that have had success with is angelfish, blood parrots, rainbow shark, clown loaches, yo-yo loaches, and mollies. Now, finally, I just wanted to wrap up with my final thoughts and recommendations for anyone thinking about getting cories, or what to think about if you are going to get cories. So now, overall, they're just a great active fish, and I love that they get along with everybody. They don't bother plants, so you can put them in an aquascape, planted tank. For a community tank, especially one that's not that large, they're an absolutely great bottom dweller. You also can mix different types, which is cool. And there are so many different types. I highly recommend looking online. Either you can browse to the Corydoras section on my website, or look online at other websites. There's so many different types. Before you get them, maybe see what few ones you might be most interested in. I think they're very hardy. Some places will say some cories are kind of moderate difficulty, but in my opinion, they're going to be overall, most of them, pretty easy. So I think they're a great beginner fish. They're great for a beginner who has a community and wants just an easy bottom dweller that'll get along with everybody. So yeah, very positive things to say in general. And so I think they're a great match for anyone, basically on any skill level, whether you're beginner or you're more experienced and you haven't had them before, but you're curious about keeping them. Anyways, I'd love to hear if you've kept Corydoras or would like to in the future. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a quick like, as it helps others find the video and my channel more easily. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch everyone in the next video.